I've carried a burden for too long on my own. I wasn't created to bear it alone. I hear your invitation to let it all go. Yeah, I see it now. I'm laying it down, and I know that I need you. I run to the Father, I fall into grace. I'm done with the hiding, no reason to wait. My heart needs a surgeon, my soul needs a friend. So I run to the Father again and again and again and again. Oh, oh, oh. You saw my condition, had a plan from the start. Your son for redemption, the price of my heart. I don't have a context for that kind of love. I don't understand, I can't comprehend. All I know is I need you. I run to the Father, I fall into grace. I'm done with the hiding, no reason to wait. My heart needs a surgeon, my soul needs a friend. So I run to the Father again and again and again and again. Oh, 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 my heart has been in your sights long before my first breath. Running into your arms is running to life from death. And I feel this rush deep in my chest. Your mercy is calling out. Just as I am, you pull me in, and I know I need you now. I run to the Father, I fall into grace. I'm done with the hiding, no reason to wait. My heart needs a surgeon, my soul needs a friend. So I run to the Father again and again. I run to the Father, I fall into grace. I'm done with the hiding, no reason to wait. My heart found a surgeon, my soul found a friend. So I run to the Father again and again and again and again. Oh, 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 and oh, oh, oh.
Back in February of 2011, there was a Category 5 cyclone that hit the northern part of Queensland. It did $3.5 billion of damage. And I remember as this was taking place, the rest of Australia was watching on, hoping for a positive outcome in what was surely going to be a disaster. At the time, I was listening to Triple J. And I remember hearing a band be interviewed, and at the end of the interview, they said to the band, "Is there any message that you would like to send out to the people up in the top end?" And they simply said, well, I guess all of our atheist prayers go out to the people up in North Queensland. And I know they didn't mean to say anything offensive. I think they were just trying to say the right thing that fitted into their worldview somehow. But it certainly got me thinking, what would an atheist prayer look like? Is there a sermon illustration in that comment? And could it be possible that we as believers often pray prayers that are similar to the prayers that atheists pray? Prayers that lack faith and conviction and belief behind them. Well, I want to look at that idea in Acts chapter 12. And in Acts chapter 12, starting in verse 1, it says this: "About that time, King Herod Agrippa began to persecute some believers in the church. He had the apostle Paul, John's brother, killed with a sword. When Herod saw how much this pleased the Jewish people, he also arrested Peter." This took place during the Passover celebration. This is about 10 years after the birth of Christianity. The church is thriving and growing, much to the displeasure of the Jewish people. They saw this as a tremendous threat. James was arrested, and it says he was put to death by the sword, which means publicly executed. James was no ordinary Christian. James was John's brother, one of the sons of thunder, one of the key leaders in the early church. This is no random martyrdom. This is a key figure in early Christianity being taken out by the Jewish leadership. And the king saw how much this pleased the people that he was trying to get to re-elect him. So he thought, well, if they were happy about James, then I'm going to go after the big dog. I'm going to get Peter, and I'm going to put him in prison, and I'm going to kill him as well. And they are going to flip. They are going to love me for this. Well, it goes on in verse 5. It says, "But while Peter was in prison, the church prayed very earnestly for him." And that word earnestly in the Greek literally means with intense fervent. It's the same word that was used for the way that Jesus prayed in the garden. The kind of prayer where you're just pouring your guts out to God and desperately pleading for mercy and for a miracle. Well, the prayer was answered because it goes on in verse 6. It says, "The night before Peter was to be placed on trial, he was asleep, fastened with 2 chains between 2 soldiers. Others stood guard at the prison gate. Suddenly, there was a bright light in the cell, and an angel of the Lord stood before Peter. The angel struck him on his side to awaken him and said, 'Quick, get up.' And the chains fell off his wrists." Now, I want you to try to picture what is happening here. Peter is asleep the night before he is about to be executed. That shows a tremendous amount of trust and faith in the will of God. He's soundly asleep. So asleep that he doesn't notice when a bright angel appears in his room. So the angel has to go to desperate lengths to wake him up. And it says that it struck Peter on the side. Now you need to picture this. If Peter is asleep on the ground and the angel is standing up, what part of the angel's body would he use to strike Peter? That's right, it would be his foot. He would have kicked Peter probably in the ribs. And the Greek word that is used for strike means to deliver a severe blow that often results in death. So literally what we are seeing here in verse 7 is an angel comes into Peter's cell and kicks him in the ribs so hard that it could kill him. Now, if I was a different kind of pastor, I would start preaching a sermon like, maybe you need a kick in the ribs from an angel. Who here needs a kick? Who needs an angel to come down from heaven and give you a kick in the ribs? But I'm not going to preach that kind of sermon because what happens next is so much more important. It goes on, and I want you to come to verse 12 and verse 14, where it says, "When he realized this, he went to the home of Mary and the brother of John Mark, and many were gathered there. He knocked at the door in the gate, and the servant girl Rhoda came out to open it." Remember that church that was praying? Remember those people who were gathered fervently praying for a miracle that Peter would be released? This is that house. Peter goes to that house after he's been released by an angel, and he knocks on the door, and a girl named Rhoda comes and answers the door. And when she recognized Peter's voice, she was so overjoyed that instead of opening the door, she ran back inside and told everyone, Peter is standing at the door. And I can imagine Peter is panicking because he's now an escaped fugitive with a death sentence hanging over his head outside in the cold while Rhoda goes and spreads the news. Well, what happens next is a little bit discouraging. They don't really believe Rhoda. They say, Rhoda, you are out of your mind. But she insisted, and they said, well, if you saw something, it must have been Peter's angel, which is a whole weird Jewish belief that I don't have time to get into. But they sooner believed an ancient myth than believed that their prayer for Peter had been answered. And when you come down to verse 16, it says, meanwhile, Peter continued knocking. When they finally opened the door and saw him, they were amazed. And you have to ask yourself, why were they amazed when the thing that they had been praying for actually happened? Why were they quicker to believe that it was some weird apparition of an angel than it was the very thing they had been petitioning God for? Why were they amazed? Well, in the past, I've preached on this passage in the Bible, and I've used this as an example of how not to pray. Don't be like the people in this house. Pray with faith. Pray with conviction. Don't pray without hope. Pray with belief. Pray with an expectation of God's miracles. That's how I've preached this passage in the past. But I don't preach it that way anymore. I preach it with celebration of these broken people who continued to carry on in their faith when they felt more lost than they ever had. And the reason is because over the last 5 years of my life, there has been many times where I have struggled to pray at all. Because I've been overwhelmed by the feeling that whether I pray or whether I don't pray, I don't think it's going to make any difference. Because I've prayed for things and nothing has seemed to happen. I've prayed for friends, I've prayed for family that they would be healed of terrible injuries and diseases, and they died anyway. A few years ago, while I was still the youth director, I had a friend come and speak to the staff at the camp. And he told this incredible story about one afternoon he was driving in his car and he felt the impression of the Spirit say, go and knock on that door. And he felt stupid about it and he felt like it wasn't really God, but he couldn't shake this feeling to knock on the door. So he got out of his car and he knocked on the door, and a man answered the door and he said, hey, this is my name and I'm just in the community trying to make friends. And the man said, who sent you? And he said, no one sent me. I just felt like I should knock on your door. And the man said, come inside. And he took him out to his veranda where he had a noose strung up because he was about to take his life. And he was able to be led to Jesus. That man is apparently now an elder in a church and living a fantastic life. And we all celebrated and we all cheered and clapped and gave glory to God for the way that he intervened. But then 2 weeks later, while still serving at summer camp, my mum took her life in the exact same way. And I was left wondering, where was the person that was coming to her house? Where was the person that was led by the Spirit to knock on her door? Why did this happen for him but not for my mum? You see, I don't criticize these people in this house anymore. I rejoice in them because they were utterly broken. Just days before this, they had been through it all already. They saw James get taken into prison. And I'm guessing, just like they did with Peter, they gathered together and they prayed fervently. And they prayed earnestly for James to be released and for James to escape prison and to not be put to death. But then they received the news that he was executed by the sword. Their prayers didn't work. Nothing happened. And they were broken and defeated. And then they get the news that now they've got Peter. And now they're going to do the same thing to him. And somehow, in the midst of their brokenness and their lack of trust and their lack of faith, they pull it together enough to band together and to pray as best as they can for Peter. And what happened to Peter? God sent an angel and delivered him. God brought them back to their very home. Thank God that they didn't stop praying when they found loss in James and continued to pray because they saw victory with Peter. I can't tell you why God rescued Peter but didn't rescue James? I don't have that kind of answer. For the same reason that I don't have the answer that I often get asked of people. Why did God answer this real trivial prayer about something meaningless in my life, but he didn't seem to answer the one that was really important? Why did God save that person from cancer but not my friend? I don't know. I get asked this all the time and I don't know. But I do know that just like this group of Christians gathered in this house, we can't stop. We still have to lean into the fact that, you know what, even though I don't get it, and even though this is making me feel a bit lost, God is still good, God is still just, and he knows far more than I do. And I don't know who my prayer might be helping or who needs breakthrough from what I'm praying, so I'm just going to keep praying anyway. If they hadn't have prayed, I wonder if Peter would have been released from prison. You know, this is real faith stuff. This is actually really hard. This is continuing to grab hold of God and believe in the hope that we have in Scripture, even when it feels dark and cold and ugly and nothing seems to make sense and it doesn't feel like we're in the place and it seems like Jesus has let go of the wheel. This is where it really meets the road. Jesus, we love you. We need to somehow keep trusting you. Can you teach us to pray like they prayed? That even when we don't want to pray, even when it's easier to lose hope, we continue to hold on to hope, because more than any other promise that you have given your people, you love us, you want good for us, and you are coming back for us.